Hello, I'm Deb Calvert. I am so glad that you're here with me today to talk about what is one of our most popular topics, very much in demand. If you go back and look at all the other presentations here on the People First Potential channel on Bright Talk, you'll notice that this is the third, maybe fourth time we've presented about leadership philosophies. And that's because people always have more questions, more interest, and it's important to keep bringing this to new audiences because this is for leaders at every level, and it is about your personal effectiveness, and it is something that can be transformational, a game changer for anyone who spends a little time in headspace thinking about their own personal leadership philosophy. For those who are new to the channel, let me give you just a little bit of setup here. We are doing monthly presentations, but we'll occasionally do replays or special topics or have guests. So I encourage you to subscribe to the channel and stay on top of what's available here. In addition to this channel, there's a YouTube channel, People First Productivity Solutions, People First Potential. You can come over to People First Leadership Academy, where we have lots of free content and courses that are available for you. And I really hope that you'll connect with me because I will send you the things that are most relevant for you instead of you having to go and search for them. So let's connect on LinkedIn at a minimum. You can subscribe to our newsletter. Information about all of that is right below the video. Take a look there in the attachments. And while you're at it, please help yourself to all the other bonus content that I've included. You'll notice that there are slides from today's presentation. You can download that PDF. There is a worksheet. This is brand new. We've never used it before with this presentation, but it's been a very popular part of courses about this topic. So I hope that you'll take that worksheet all about developing your own personal leadership philosophy. It's a guided instruction worksheet, and it includes lots of examples from others who have done this same work. If you're brand new to Bright Talk, you may not know that you can, if you're attending live, you can post questions for me. I will answer those questions as they come. I will make sure to try to incorporate them into the presentation. So you might not recognize that your question's been answered unless you're really tuned in. I don't like to hold them all until the very end and then try to rapidly cram them all in there. But if it seems like I didn't get to your question, or if in fact I did not get to your question, please email me. I would like to talk with you personally. I want to answer your questions, and I hope to cover all of them. You may not also know here on Bright Talk that in addition to attachments and questions, that we invite feedback, and I treasure it. So at the end of the presentation, please leave me a review with any comments about what you liked or what you'd like to see done differently in the future, because we aim to please. All right, enough setup. We're going to jump right into the content for today. And I'm going to start with a poem. I have to, because this is so apt, so well fitting to what we're talking about. One of the things I like best about this poem is that the name of the poet rhymes with the rest of the poem. So check this out. Stand upright, speak thy thoughts, declare the truth thou hast that all may share. Be bold, proclaim it everywhere. They only live who dare. Courtesy of Voltaire. So, this little poem, I say it's very apt because essentially a leadership philosophy is a declaration of who you are, of what you stand for, of your thoughts in a way that holds you accountable to them and makes it clear for everybody else to see. If you attended our recent presentation here about the 12 dimensions of trust, this may also seem resonant to you because one of the 12 dimensions of trust is openness, transparency, being knowable to others. And when you work on your personal leadership philosophy, you will be more knowable. People will understand who you are, why you are, how you are, and what matters to you. Let's break this down a little bit more before we dive into the why and the how. I think it's important to clarify that, yes, we are talking about a philosophy. A philosophy is sort of a nebulous kind of a thing, but We aren't going to stop with just having some random thoughts or some general ideas. We're going to be talking about actions to back up this philosophy so that it's not nebulous, but it's concrete, it's real, it's observable, it's meaningful. A philosophy, though, a couple of things to extract from these definitions. These are really important to our discussion today. First of all, philosophy is very personal. This comes from you. It's about you. There is no right, no wrong, no good, better, bad, worse, best, none of that. It is what it is, and it's you. So be liberated. Don't be trying to write a philosophy to please others. This is about an expression of you, of your beliefs. And philosophy, also of note here, philosophy is something that you choose. It's not imposed on you. You're not held up to somebody else's. This is not like the company's values and vision. This is about you. What is meaningful and important to you? And when you know that, when you've made that deliberate choice, what's so cool about the very act of doing that is that now you'll make other subsidiary choices in service of alignment with your own philosophy, having gotten that clarity. You're going to make other intentional choices based on reflections related to your philosophy. And if you don't do that, by the way, if you don't do any of this work related to having a personal leadership philosophy, I do want to point out that you're going to end up with sort of an accidental philosophy, one that's vague, it's unclear to others, it's probably vague and unclear even to you. Because philosophy is meant as a foundation. And when you have that solid core that gives you clarity, it can become something that guides your decisions. It will help you to have a focus point so that you can sort out all the competing inputs, all the noise that comes at you in any given day. Okay, then. So that's the word philosophy. And I wanted to make sure you had sort of those big ideas about what it is. And now that we've defined that, I want to talk about what it would look like, what it means and what you do to have a personal leadership philosophy. And I'm taking this description from an author. He's not alone in his belief, but he really captures the essence of a personal leadership philosophy very nicely here. Ed Ruggiero, he in fiction and nonfiction, he's got some great books out there. He says that successful leaders know their personal leadership philosophy and communicate it by living it passionately every day in all they say and do. They have taken the time to determine who they are, their values, and priorities. They know their course and have set their internal compass, which gives them greater self knowledge, greater self confidence, and improved effectiveness as a leader. This is accomplished by writing a personal leadership philosophy, which states the core values you live by, what you expect of your people, what they can expect of you, and how you will evaluate performance. So, lots of very big, important ideas within that. We're going to talk about every single one of them because they all are so meaningful. We are going to be referring to our personal leadership philosophy as a PLP, just so it's nice and short here. Your PLP, Ed Ruggiero says, is your key to success. That's the title of one of his books. Now, let me give you a little context here. He happens to have a military background. My parents and many of the people I grew up with also have military backgrounds. And so I know a little bit about this. It's very common in all branches of the US military, in the armed services, and in the military command for many other nations too, for their top ranking officials to develop and declare their philosophy of leadership. You may be interested to learn that the US Army, many years ago, they did away with standard management training. That was about 20 years ago. It's been a while. And instead, they implemented leadership development. And they send many, many officers to courses that include work on leadership philosophy. In their leadership program at the US Army War College in Pennsylvania, they have an advanced course that's called the Philosophy of Leadership. And a prerequisite to that class is called the Philosophy of Command. In other words, they spend a lot of time learning about what we're just tackling at a high level today. But when you think about this, right, when you think about the military, it becomes pretty easy to understand why a leadership philosophy would be so important in that realm. A philosophy, a statement of who you are, of what you stand for, your core beliefs. Right? A leadership philosophy that covers all the bases here that Ed Ruggiero covered. They go through this exercise because in the military, think about it, as a commanding officer, you're asking people to follow you into battle, putting their own lives at risk. So you bet, right? They better know who you are, what you stand for, that you can be trusted, that they have some sense or some understanding of what matters to you. So that's why it matters so much in the military. And maybe in the work you do, there aren't stakes that are quite so high. But frankly, don't we all deserve to have that kind of clarity about the people that we follow? The ones that are leading us to a new place, one that we've never been before. Perhaps it's a little scary out there. We can get an extra measure of confidence if we know who it is and we can trust them because they have that clarity. Let's take another look at this definition that comes from Ed Ruggiero. We're going to use it because he gives us 5 really helpful verbs. In his definition, you can extract out the verbs know. Successful leaders know their personal leadership philosophy. And they communicate it. How? By living it passionately every day in everything they say and do. They're consistent. Not only that, but those leaders, they have taken the time to determine who they are, their values, and their priorities. They've thought it through. It's become meaningful. And because of that, because it was meaningful and personal and they did this work, they set their internal compass to get that self-knowledge, that self-confidence, their improved effectiveness as a leader. And they wrote it down. They did this because they wrote it down. When you write something down, it is a little bit more meaningful. You do take it more seriously. You've got a little bit more accountability and clarity. So we're going to walk through these verbs. We're not going to take them exactly in this order because I found that if you do them in a slightly different order, it'll accelerate the process and make this a really, really profound exercise for you. We're going to start with the determine verb. Leaders who are highly effective, successful leaders, they determine who they are. They determine who they are by taking certain steps, doing certain thinking. Successful leaders, Ed Ruggiero said, let me remind you, successful leaders know their personal leadership philosophy and communicate it by living it passionately every day in all they say and do. They have taken the time to determine who they are, their values, and priorities. So these 5 questions that you see on screen, you might think that it seems a little indulgent. Maybe you feel a little bit silly taking the time to answer these questions. But I don't want you to feel that way because doing this, truly reflectively spending time to answer these 5 questions, this is where some of that magic happens. If we're not taking time to think about questions like these, then you might get swept up in the momentum of the crowd. You might accidentally be placing value and priority on things that you wouldn't independently choose. But in the heat of the moment, Caught up in groupthink, people often set aside personal values and opt instead for group norms. With teenagers, we call this peer pressure, and it's every parent's worst fear for their children, but it certainly is not isolated to teenagers. Adults do this too. In workplaces, for example, you might have a very strong leader who exerts authority or expectations that cause entire teams of people to value something that they would never otherwise choose. People who would independently tell you they value time with their family end up working 60-hour weeks and giving up important family time due to those workplace pressures. Over time, they might even forget what matters most to them and instead recite the company line. When asked what they value, they might even say hard work before they say family time. So it's good to know, it's important to know what your own values are, where they come from, how serious you are about them, and how they make you feel about yourself. Now, let me give you a warning. When you start to sort out for yourself the values that you hold nearest and dearest, you're going to find sometimes that your actions are not in alignment with your values. And there's only two choices now. Now that you have this awareness, you have to either abandon the values because turns out they're aspirational, they're really not that important to you, your actions over time, or maybe not. Maybe the values were never yours, they were foisted on you. But if your actions don't match up, it's either that the value is not valid or you've lost sight of that value and your actions need to be remedied. You need to make some course corrections so that your actions will be more aligned, more reflective of your true values. Those are the only two choices. It's either not truly a value or you've got to work out your actions so that they do reflect the value. So, step one, it's a big step. It takes a lot of time. This is not a 5-minute exercise. We're certainly not going to get you all the way through to the end in a 45-minute webinar. Instead, you're just going to get the ideas. You're going to take the slides that I put there for you in the attachments, and you're going to begin to do some of this work on your own. And if you get stuck, you're going to contact me. Please do. I always enjoy these conversations with people, and I'd like to be able to help you work through any of the difficulties that you might experience. So, step one is to determine who you are, who you really are, not just who you aspire to be. Step two in making this determination is to check that you've embraced those values and priorities so much so that they line up with your actions. Your actions are a reflection of your values. Let me give you a shortcut, a little litmus test that you can do. Take a look back. Pick out 3 events that happened last week, 3 critical events that involved others. And ask yourself these new questions that you now see on screen. What happened in this critical incident? How did I react and why? How did others react and why? What did I learn about myself based on what I did and how I felt? And how will I apply what I learned? I want to encourage you to be very honest with yourself in this assessment. It's important to have a true understanding about yourself as you conduct this exercise. And once you've captured these insights for all 3 of those events, you'll want to compare what's revealed here to what you determined were your priorities and your values. The point of this exercise is to figure out if the values and priorities you selected are actually the ones you're expressing and responding with. They might not be, and I want to be sure to be clear about this. They might not be, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes we select values and priorities that are echoes from the past. They're not nearly as important as we think in our present. Right? Sometimes the values of others crowd out our own. Sometimes we do say one thing but act in a way that's not aligned. Whatever the cause of the mismatch, no judgment. This is just an exercise to help you figure it all out. Then you think about it, understand it, you get clarity on your true values and priorities. Well, the next thing that leaders do after they determine these values and they test them and they're sure of them, the next step in those five verbs I showed you from the definition is that successful leaders, they determine who they are, their values, their priorities, and they get to be more effective. This is accomplished, Ed Ruggiero said to us, this is accomplished by writing, not thinking, not saying, but writing a personal leadership philosophy, which states the core values you live by, what you expect of your people, what they can expect of you, and how you will evaluate performance. Now, let me clarify. When I read the words your people, I'm not thinking solely, I hope you're not either, but we're not talking solely about the people who report to you or some other sort of a framework like that. Your people are the people around you, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your peers. In the org chart, it's up, down, and all around you. These are people. You're part of their network, you're part of theirs. So this is meant to affect everyone. Now, why write? Some of us don't like writing, right? But why write down your leadership philosophy? I think it's a fair question. And I bet many of you, even as we have already started here, have a general sense of what your personal leadership philosophy is. It's maybe you got to do some wool gathering to pull the pieces together, but it's there. So you might feel like this is overkill, but there are some very important reasons, some very good reasons to take the time and do this extra work. See, these benefits of writing it down, they're primarily for you. Initially, it's you who needs clarity, commitment, consistency, and accountability. And the process of putting something in writing forces us to step back and evaluate it more objectively, to look at it as others might receive it. This leadership philosophy, it isn't something that you want to do with emotion alone. You want to put thought and analysis into it. And when you write it down, you're going to find that it's more balanced, and it's going to be, when you finalize it, it's going to be something that is solid and repeatable and not subject to change based on emotions or flavor of the day. Okay, so you have done some determining of who you are and what you value. You've written that down. And the next step is to know deeply, know your own personal leadership philosophy. Successful leaders know their personal leadership philosophy and communicate it by living it passionately every day in all they say and do. They've taken the time to determine who they are, their values and priorities. They know their course and have set their internal compass, which gives them greater self-knowledge, greater self-confidence, and improved effectiveness as a leader. So there's two knowing your personal leadership philosophy, and because of that, knowing your course and being able to stay true to it. I think this is very interesting. After all this reflection and writing, there's a wholly separate step related now to knowing your own personal leadership philosophy. And this is not about knowing it so you can recite it verbatim. It's about a richer, deeper meaning, not some casual read through. It's about standing in front of a room full of people and being able to talk about your personal leadership philosophy for 30 minutes without any notes or slides or reminders. And then imagine that there'd be another 20 or 30 minutes of questions for you after you finished. That's how well you need to know and understand and internalize your personal leadership philosophy. What's more, you have to know it so well that you live it and you breathe it in everything that you do. If this is to guide your actions and show an example to others of who you are and what you stand for, then you need to be intimately familiar with your PLP. Right? This can't be an occasional thing that you bring out when it suits you. It has to be a constant expression. When you know your leadership philosophy, you also know your course of action. Right? This knowledge makes everything easier. Decisions and choices become easier. You know what to say yes to, what to say no to, how much time to spend on things, what your priorities should be. You get clarity. I think these 9 words that I put for you on screen, these are these are the outcomes of knowing your PLP so intimately in your bones, knowing what you really, really believe in and what you stand for. When you have that, you get, as a result, these 9 amazing things that unleash all sorts of other potential within you. Now, we've got a couple more verbs that we've got to cover from our definition because when you know your course, you have set your internal compass. That internal compass, as I said, gives you greater self knowledge, greater self confidence, and improved effectiveness as a leader. It's just as powerful as it sounds. Imagine, imagine that you go through your day to day at work, at home, and everything that you do, and you never have this feeling of being lost in the woods. You seldom feel overwhelmed. You don't have a lot of ambiguity surrounding you. You have a bright star, a north star that shines very, very brightly, and you're always able to find it and navigate toward it. Think of the confidence that you'll project when you know exactly where you're going and when you no longer have doubts about how you're going to get there. Others will notice, others will be inspired by that, and they'll be more willing and eager to follow you. Best of all, one of the things that I see happen with people is that when they do this work and when they get to this point where they can be so confident and so inspirational, they seldom have doubts within themselves. I'm talking about all kinds of doubts. We covered this in a previous presentation this year about imposter syndrome and other things that cause self-doubt. Well, it goes away. When you do the work of really knowing your values and figuring out how to align your actions with them, self-doubt is gone. It's replaced by confidence. Others' potential doubt in you is eradicated. Instead, they're inspired by you. They're watching. They see this consistency. They see this confidence, and they want some of that. I'm not kidding when I say this can be a very, very profound experience. I've taken a lot of leaders through the very same exercises that I've given you documents to go through. I've seen the results. I've seen the 180, like almost like looking at a different person when they simply work out their personal leadership philosophy and really embrace it and do something with it. Now, there's one more step. We got to talk about this one. I definitely want you to do this last. Don't do this first. Do the work of determining, do the work of knowing. Only then are you ready to communicate your leadership philosophy. Don't try to accelerate and do this too soon. Put it in writing first, work it out, know it, set it, begin to internalize it and know it extremely well before you ever go public with it. Successful leaders know their personal leadership philosophy and communicate it by living it passionately every day in all they say and do. So, yes, I am suggesting at some point that you go ahead and share it in writing because you've already put it in writing. Why not? And describe it. Tell people what it is and where it came from and the process that you went through, because just hearing about that process is inspiring and it makes you knowable. Act on it consistently. Share how it is influencing your decisions because that makes you more predictable. But do not write it down, disseminate it, and do nothing else. That will actually interfere with your credibility. What you're doing here, your personal leadership philosophy, it's basically a statement of what you believe. That's a credo. It's a little deeper than a simple credo statement, but it is more intense on purpose because it really gets to the root of who you are and what you believe. But notice that the root word of credibility is credo. These two things go hand in hand. People believe in you. They see you as being credible when they see alignment and consistency. If they see you acting on what you believe, well, that's credibility. If they see the opposite, you put it in writing, you handed it out, and suddenly your actions are different from what you said you believe, ooh, you now have a credibility issue. Don't create that for yourself. Be careful. You want to make sure that this is serving you well and not getting in your way. So don't do it in a way that's only halfway, because that just won't work. Don't do it at all. Seriously, don't do it at all if you're not ready, willing, and able to commit the time and the thinking work to doing it well and meaningfully. Okay, so your description, it's pretty clear. It's saying that you communicate your PLP. How? Not just by putting it in writing and handing it out, but by living it passionately every day in all you say and do. That's a very high standard, but that's what makes you credible, and that's what makes you inspirational. It all starts it all starts with knowing what you believe. Your PLP is what you believe. The 4 steps on screen help you to make this happen, but they only come after the other 4 steps before communicating. Even when the going gets tough, even when there are critical incidents, you will stick to your leadership philosophy because it will be an expression of who you are and what matters most to you. Let me give you a sample. There are lots of samples in the attachment that I've given you that's all about an instructed guide for making your own personal leadership philosophy. But here's one that's nice and short, so I'll share it with you. This leader has done this work not just for a day or two. It literally took her nearly 2 years to come up with this. She had some false starts. They weren't something that really resonated even with her. She came back, did another pass, and finally got to a place after several of those where it was her, and it was what she could truly believe. Her values, she started there, and she did exactly what I've described to you here. She checked her actions against her values. She decided that her true 5 core values were family first, resilience, bouncing back in the face of adversity, the humility to keep learning and growing, equality, never, no matter what her position was, thinking that in any way she was better than anyone else. That's what it meant to her. And spirituality, different from religion for her, but it was about being able to be in touch with something beyond herself and the world around her. So those were the values, and she worked them out, and she had very deep meanings to each of them. And then she started with a credo statement. This didn't really change all that much over time. She said, I believe that there is more to every person than others can see. It is up to each of us to dig deep and find our passion and purpose. Doing that makes us worthy of being followed. So that was her leadership credo. She started there because she happened to be in a class where we all did that work together. And then she kept writing these personal leadership philosophies that were pretty long, flowery sounding, and they didn't really seem to have all that much to do with either her values or her credo statement. They seemed, I eventually got to a place where I understood this and was able to help her see this in coaching. They seemed as if they were trying to please other people. So when she was able to reconcile that and work that out, here's what she came up with for her PLP. As a leader, I look for the hidden good in every person. I create opportunities to amplify hidden abilities and bring out the best from others. I do not need or want the spotlight, but I believe all people deserve moments where they can shine and are celebrated. I feel that it's my job to encourage, affirm, and challenge others so they can identify and build their strengths. It's also my responsibility to give others feedback so they continually grow. Now, flash forward, she got to this point. She believed it. She sort of knew in her heart of hearts, this is it. This is the one. This fits. And she had no longer had any doubts about it. And she eventually then communicated this out to her staff and her peers and her manager. That made her instantly accountable to it. And her confidence level skyrocketed. When she made decisions, she pulled this out and she showed it to people. I made this decision because. When she gave coaching or feedback to people, she pulled this out and said, because this is something I genuinely believe. And somehow they were able to receive her feedback differently. She was able to explain to her manager and others why some of the awards and recognitions weren't all that motivating to her. She didn't really need the spotlight. And it was right here, it was real, and it just all the pieces fit together. It was like a giant jigsaw puzzle. She finally got more than the framework. She got all the pieces in place. And this was a few years ago. Her she's just continued off the charts to grow and develop as a person, to get promotion after promotion and all those awards that she doesn't even want. Most importantly to her though, is that so many people that she's worked with, including direct reports, have also seen their career trajectory off the charts. People around her are liberated and they're growing, and she attributes that to doing this exercise. So if you would like to do something similar, here comes your assignment. Remember, you can download the slides so you don't have to worry about this being something that you take furious notes about to try to capture it all. But what I really recommend that you do is follow each of these steps in order. That will help you to develop your personal leadership philosophy without hitting a wall or coming to a place where it's just too hard to do. It all starts with those questions. I had them on slides 7 and 8 for you. That is not an exercise that you can do in 20 minutes. It's something that you should think about, reflect on. Some people like to journal, some like to have conversations with coaches. You decide, but make it truly deep introspective work. It's not to satisfy anyone else. It's not to make a check mark on this assignment. It's to do a genuine deep dive, a discovery of who you are and what really, really matters to you. Now, you can start in either place. If you want to start small and just write a credo statement, do that. It's helpful, it's appropriate. And later, you might or might not decide to build out a longer form personal leadership philosophy. Some of these do get very, very lengthy, and I've given you some samples of those. You'll decide what makes sense for you. There's not a size matters piece to this assignment at all. Step 3, it's optional. I promise you, though, that if you do this, I will give you feedback. I will have a conversation with you, or at least an email exchange with you if you get stuck or if you want feedback at any point along the way. And that will be 100% confidential. I never ever share these unless someone gives me permission to. So, up to you. And after you've gotten to this point where you feel pretty confident you're on the right track, I want you to continue reflecting so that you can internalize this, so that you really, really know it in your bones that this is your personal leadership philosophy. And only then should you communicate it to others. When you do, be loud and proud. Like Voltaire said, right? This is about speak thy truth, declare boldly. Right? You'll feel good about it. You'll know that it's the right one when you can do that. And continually, so that you don't get off course, continually check back for alignment. Make sure that what you have put together is what you're reflecting in your actions. All right, we're about to wrap up here. So if you have any questions, this would be a good time to post them for me. I'll leave you with another quote, Thomas Jefferson. In matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand like a rock. Your personal leadership philosophy becomes something that will ground you. It will give you an opportunity to stand strong in who you are and in what you believe. I'd love to see you do this work and email me something where we can have an exchange. But I also would like to see you in some other places. Come check out the website for People First Productivity Solutions. There are tons of resources there. While you're here at Bright Talk, take a look at all the other content that we've posted for you here. Help yourself. We always do bonus content in the attachments. Load it up when you're there. You can read our blogs, join the Connect community, and get our weekly newsletter. Check out our courses, including self paced e learning courses over on People First Leadership Academy. That website is peoplefirstpotential.com. Wherever we are going to have a chance to interact, please do. I really enjoy most of all the opportunities for us to meet one to one and to have a continued conversation.